Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining the session today on Data Leaders Exchange, and we are discussing about the future of data today. I'm Rakhi, and I'm from the Google Cloud Platform team. I'm a specialist, and I look after data and analytics, and I talk to a lot of digital native customers as part of my job. And prior to this, I had worked with a lot of data and analytics platforms like Tableau, SAP, Cognos, and Oracle, and so on and so forth. And that's my background over the last 16 years. I'm just going to go around the room and call in people whose videos are coming in the order. So Akash, over to you.
Yeah. Hey, hi. So yeah, my name is Akash Agarwal. So I head the machine learning in the fintech startup CredGenix. So prior to working in CredGenix, I have worked in Mastercard as well. I have worked in two startups where I was the first ML hire. So I'd build the products like from scratch and add machine learning to it. So my role in this fintech startup CredGenix is very similar. So I have about 9 years of like experience working in like machine learning domain. In terms of my machine learning like experience, I have filed like patents. I have research papers as well in the best conferences like New York IPS and ICML as well.
Thank you, Avinash. Puchadri, would you like to go next?
Sure. Thank you. So, my name is Pochadri. So, I had the technology at Credit Vidya. So, I've been with Credit Vidya for close to 7 years now, uh, building the team from like 4 5 member team to whatever we are right now, around 120 tech guys with a 400 member organization, right? So, that's the journey at Credit Vidya. One of the important things at Credit Vidya is the scale at which we really get the data and process the data, right? So, the peak we have seen is close to like 700 GB of data coming in every day. Right now, we are doing like around 300 to 400 GB of data every day right now, right? And different kinds of data practically, because that is what we thrive on. And we use data practically everywhere, everything. And that is what we play with, building AI models, ML models, a lot of that stuff, because that is what has helped us to really scale the business in the last 3 4 years, right? So that's about it. And before that, so been into startup, into payments domain from last around 12 13 years, into fintech payment related stuff. Started my own company also on that. Then before that, I was with Oracle for close to 7 years. So yeah, that's about me.
Wow, that's a huge team, right? For a 400 employee strength organization, the data and analytics team, you said it's about 120?
No, not really that. A tech team is 120. Data
Hmm.
analytics team is probably like around 5 to 6 people. Yeah.
Oh,
So
okay, okay,
that's the
okay.
data engineering team. And ML team, I didn't like ML team, probably it will be like around 8 people or so. There
Uh-huh.
is a BI team as well, which is like around 7 or 8 people. So if I look at just the only the data, people are playing with the data, using it, processing, analyzing, and all that, probably it'll be like around 20 to 22 odd people, right? So
Interesting. And Cred Vidya is into underwriting, is that right?
correct. We are into underwriting, and we have got into the lending space last 3 years ago. We are doing a
Okay,
lending marketplace as such. So yeah.
okay. Great. Thank you. Ashish, over to you.
Yeah, hi everyone. This is Ashish, and so I'm working with Neo, which is a fintech startup. I am leading the technology team here. I'm head of engineering here, and then before this, I was working with Oracle. I was heading the India Development Center for automation, and before that, I was part of MakeMetric. Yeah, that's short summary about myself.
I think
Thank you.
please go.
Correct. Okay, Avinash is left. Over to you.
Yeah, hello guys. Good evening. This is Avinash. Avinash, and I head the product management, design, and data at Relat. Relat is an online travel agency focused in the Middle Eastern and North African geographies. So I generally introduce the company as the MMT of MakeMetric of the Middle Eastern geography. So it's an Arabic speaking, the target segment brand. So but we are the entire back office and all these departments, category, product design sits in Hyderabad, India. So yeah, so that's I have about 10 years of work experience in product management.
Excellent. Great. So I think I have something common with at least two of the panelists here. We all worked at Oracle at some point. And
Oh, that's
great.
great. Yeah.
So today, I think it's largely fintech, and with the exception of Relat, which is a travel aggregator. Largely the space is fintech, right? But good to have all of you on this call today. And at Google, we do have conversations with our customer, not just in fintech, but across, primarily around data challenges. And we come across a host of data challenges when it comes to management of data or risk management of existing data, data loss. Another set of problem would be data residing in silos and illegal access of data. When it comes to fintech, there is a whole lot of another whole lot of concerns around compliance and with regulatory bodies. So I just wanted to pick your brain in terms of how difficult and why is it so difficult to manage data. Ashish, would you want to take a stab at it?
Yeah, sure. See, Raki, I believe that over a period of time, the biggest challenge or the biggest issue in managing the data is that the sheer volume of data itself has grown a lot. In previous days, the data was primarily the data source primarily was the applications using which the data was captured and then processed. Over a period of time, the data is one coming from your application logs, the metrics which you are gathering, social handles. So the data sources over a period of time have increased, and hence the data is also growing exponentially. So I think that the sheer volume of data coming from multiple sources, that is one challenge. And the overall challenge, apart from that, if you see, is that how do you, manage the full life cycle of this data, which is coming from so many sources, right? So that is one. Now the data which is collected is also kept in different systems. There may be some application team which is storing some data, then some BI team which is storing this data, then there is a team who is a business team. They are working on some different data. So the data silo, being siloed in different systems, also I believe is one of the challenge. And then how do you knit this data so that it gives you a 360 view of whatever, whether it is customer data, whether it is transaction data. So that I believe is the other challenge, right? And then in terms of the data quality, right? So how do you ensure that the data, whatever you are gathering, is of high quality? What I mean by quality is that there may be a lot of data which you are gathering, but how much data from that is really required by your organization? It is very difficult to figure that out, right? Because the massive data ingestion is happening from different sources. So that is one. And then I think the last thing which is there is that how do you properly safeguard this data, right? Because once you have a lot of data, it also means that you need to have build proper systems in place so that there is proper authorization, you have access logs, who is accessing this data, and it is not getting hacked by someone. Data security is another challenge when you have a lot of data. So I believe these are few points why I feel that managing data is becoming a challenge nowadays.
Great input, Ashish. Thank you so much for sharing this. The systems and solutions that you had spoken briefly about are, easily said than implemented. You will have a whole set of other problems around security and, skill issues and so on and so forth. So, what else do you think, Avinash, what is on your mind when it comes to the difficulty around managing data?
Right. So, like Ashish has spoken, my first point of discussion was also about multiple sources of data. So there are several databases which get stored, and then getting insights out of data to merge all these databases would become one big challenge. But apart from that, I would like to point out, not utilizing the data regularly. So sometimes, the data is being stored, and then sometimes it is accessed, and when the problem statement is done, people might leave it like that. So where the data is getting accumulated, which is probably there are certain data disruptions happening, but which go unnoticed. And the another point is generally business teams, they get data to be, these requirements of data to be tracked would come on necessity based. So there's a lot of unknowns which are present in the business, and they are not even tracked in the first place. So the latest data will have to be tracked from probably day, not from the day one onwards, probably day 365 days later of the product release or the feature release. And now that puts a challenge, because this data has to be inserted, or there needs to be a fit that has to be figured out in the already existing data architecture. So I think these two are also major challenges, at least in our organization. So these are the two major challenges which we have faced.
Akash, would you like to share your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think so. So most of the guys here have actually mentioned the issue with the basically with having like multiple sources of data, but but one of the biggest problem what we face, right, is that, see, we have 60 plus clients which are banks and NBFCs in India, and they all have same product. But what we have seen that no two banks basically have the same data. So whenever we work with these basically these companies, right, the kind of data we get, either the naming will be different, there will be some base set of features which would be same, but then the features what they use would be different, right? So then what happens is that for us the most important thing is to create a layer which basically which makes sure that the data across these banks and NBFCs are basically same, right? So that is actually which is built by us, so that to make sure that all the insights what we are extracting, all the machine learning what we have done, we can directly use it, right? So that is one of the biggest problem what like what we see as well.
Great. Pochadri.
I think most of the points were touched. I'll just touch upon the, I think the three V's of the data, right? Volume, velocity, and the veracity. I think both three have to be tackled to really manage the data well. And on top of it, I think you already touched upon the governance, auditing, and security, right? So those are the, six things, that always come to my mind when we talk about managing data well, right? So apart from that, I think Akash already touched about the challenges that he faces in terms of managing the data when it is involved with banks or these customers, probably the B2B side of the story, right? So I think I'll just add to that point, probably how do you really store the data and separate that data out, right? So when you get that data in, it just cannot be combined with everybody else. I think that is one challenge that we keep seeing, that how are you really keeping my data separate from, how are you making sure that this data cannot be used by anybody else? I think right. So, and we have even seen where the data that we got from the clients has to be used only for their kind of learning, right? How do you really create those silos as well? And probably the next level would be that how do you really combine all of this data and kind of anonymize or kind of extract the features out to really start some more intelligence, right? So how do you really manage those systems, keeping security, governance, auditing, all of that in mind? I think becomes a little more important when you're dealing with the B2B kind of clients, right? So
Excellent. Thanks for summarizing this, Pochadri. Yes, you rightly mentioned the three V's when you talk about data challenges. And we've talked about data residing in silos and data growth and moving into, let's say, modern data warehouses and so on and so forth. What are some of the best practices that you've implemented in your respective organizations that are helping you manage data effectively today? Prasunjit, if you're back, would you like to go first on this?
Sure, sure. So, right now we are also getting data from multiple sources. The problem for me specifically lies in the data capturing stage itself. Like I work for a manufacturing company. I work right now. I'm working for a sales kind of a company. Okay, so what happens is that the data is punched in by various kinds of salespeople, and it's not always clean. So and not always complete also. So data completeness, even from some apps that they use, there are some limitations on the app side that the data fails to match in different places. So we find it as a really tough time to make sense of the data in those scenarios. It is hard to explain in a one call, in two lines. But then uh, the data capture itself, at the stage of data capturing, if the data is not perfect, then that poses its own challenges that I have faced. Apart from that, the challenges that I have faced in data handling is, the platform, how to, on which platform we should have the different pipelines running. Everything requires a different kind of a platform. There's no one solution fits all kind of a thing. So we have to solution it differently for multiple kinds of environments and sources. Okay. Once we bring the data all around, by the time we do that, already multiple dependencies have been created and multiple people are using the data the way we bring it. So we don't get time to, properly create a Snowflake schema or a particular data warehouse in a manner which ideally should be. Now then, to migrate the existing raw data or the unclean data being utilized by various applications within the team, then to migrate to a proper structure and then to make everyone migrate to that, that is another big challenge that we face.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing this. Puchadri, I'm just drawing parallels to what you just brought up in the previous discussion point. All of this is what we're talking about, from data capture to data lineage to making sure data resides in a meaningful fashion and building models on top of it for internal consumption. But the point that you raised brings a new set of concerns, which is exposing it to customers outside and making sure that you have the right set of permissions and control for a particular data asset. So, what are some of the best practices that you have implemented in your organization for this?
I'll come to that, the point that you've raised. Maybe I'll just touch upon two other important points that I thought are a little more important, at least from my point of view. One thing is I think the top thing that has really helped us is the commitment to maintain that data quality all the time. It's kind of a more a culture thing, right? How do you really keep talking about that and saying that, okay, why the data quality and keeping your data systems up to date, running very well is very, very important for the organization these days. That without that, I think these days no organization really runs without having perfect access to data, right? So every decision is data based. To help with that, I think other thing was the metadata for the data, right? The cataloging of the data. What data do you really have, right? So most of the times you have so much of data, but you don't know what data is where and why it is there. What does it really mean, right? So figuring it, having that kind of system has really, really helped us, right? So everybody can really go there and check like what exactly I am looking for, whether the data is available or not, right? And if it's not there, then figure out a ways to really get it in, right? But once the culture thing is fixed properly, right? So what we have seen is that all the data starts coming into these data systems. So to really make managing the data a lot easier, we realize that maintaining some kind of a data lake where I know that all the data will come there, right, in one structured format, whatever way, but all the data will really lie there, has really, really helped us to really, not really worry about okay, whether the data there, not there, and all that, right? So data being in the data lake, second, cataloging of the data, and this, data culture setting in right quality, make sure that the data is always there in right quality, are some of the best practices we thought have really helped us, right? So.
Good to hear
And
that,
in terms of,
Puchadri, that, sorry, continue.
in terms of access, right, you said that how do you really, protect access if you're really giving the access to, different teams needing to, so there is this whole, auditing framework and the governance framework that is very, very important, right? What team should have what kind of access, right? So should you have access to 3 months data, 2 months data? Now I talked about the B2B kind of scenario where there are multiple customers using, right? Maybe a small team is only accessing one customer's data, trying to build something on top of it, right? So because they're working very closely with that customer, they need to have more access to that data, right? So how do you build that kind of layer into your data systems becomes very, very important to really give the confidence to your customers that key data is very safe, secure, and only people who really need the data are getting the data, right? So that helps a lot to really calm their nerves, and also helps the internal team that okay, when I need the data, I have the data, I can access the data, I can use it, right? So so that was one very, very important thing to really make sure that everything is kind of working smoothly. Apart from that, I think so once you have the data in the data lake, right? So now how do you really create the next level of data, right? Probably something like a bronze data, silver data, probably the gold data. How do you really create the layers of your data, right? So because everything has its, use cases, probably you're using bronze to really go a little dig deeper into the data, figure out some kind of patterns, and then say, okay, maybe I have to do this kind of processing to really start creating the features which might be needed for building the intelligence, right? So how do you create that system which makes it very, very easy to for everybody to really start doing this kind of processing and creating their goal data sets and using it for intelligence, right? So that kind of system makes it very, very easy for also pushing the data culture, right? Because it also comes from the systems, right? If systems are not there, I cannot keep talking about data culture, but nothing is there, then nobody will really believe that, right? So those systems are also very, very important to really bring in. It's like a top down thing and a bottom up thing, right? You have systems building up and your culture is also coming down. So that once happens, I think magic happens. So yeah.
You've tried all of this beautifully, Pochadri. I'm so glad that you brought up the topic of culture. To become a truly data-driven organization, you need to have, whether it is internal or external stakeholders, to have trust in the data that you're providing. And it's a vicious loop, right? And the problem that you talked about, cataloging, it's a classic problem in a lot of organizations where four people are going into a meeting with four different answers to the same question because they do not have the same definition of the metrics that they're measuring. Thanks for sharing your thoughts on this. So, Avinash, would you like to share some of the best practices that you would have rolled out in
Yes.
your organization?
Sure. So, speaking about the culture, so let me speak with respect to the B2C angle in it. The perspective of B2C is that we keep delivering a lot of the product teams work on a lot of features, and then the business teams come with a lot of requirements, right? And now in order to have a better argument, now data has to be the center of decision making, built on some sort of experience or the industry knowledge on top of it. So then the practice which we had set up is that any requirement would have a success metric associated with it, which would set the objectives for the data guys too, for the data team as well. So we involve the data team. In the first place, it took a lot of time for us to understand whom to hire in the first place. How do we create the data infrastructure in the first place? So all our teams, the category teams, marketing teams, product teams, they all had product analysts who would work on top of the clean data and gather some insights out of it, right? But at the same time, nobody was defining what data needs to be properly captured at the first place when the feature is built, and what would define the success metric of it. Ultimately, everybody would say, okay, it boils down to transactions or bookings, which is direct revenue, but then there needs to be a success metric to it. So we built the culture. We It took some effort to align all these stakeholders, and in order to do that, we had to build one source of truth, like the cataloging problem, right? We had to define a definition where exactly the data gets captured, what is the meaning of that particular event name or the parameter associated in that particular events, right? So these are all one place, and it took a lot of effort to create a single dashboard where there are several types of reports are available for all the stakeholders. So the data, the agent management was given, and so there is single place. All the data team would put down all their dashboards at one place, and then all the business guys would know that, okay, if I have to think about data, there is this place which we have to go there. So we have exposed that particular thing in a way that the relevant team members would have the right access to the data. They don't fiddle around, go to GA or backend servers, just query the SQL servers and all. It's one good practice that we have been following for the past 1 year or so. And at the same time, we do regular cleanup of unused or irrelevant data. So what that means is that if a particular dashboard is not accessed for a long time, or the data is not even being looked upon, so we go back and try to clean. So we try to have this efficiency versus cost, or ROI versus the cost associated with it, right? So we keep doing that practice once in 6 months, and it is paying well to us, paying off well, because we are reducing our data costs at the same time while we are scaling the processing of the data too. So previously we were processing probably 100 GB of data in probably a week or so. Now we generate a lot of data, but we don't capture everything. we only capture the right ones which is relevant at this point of time, and make sure the clean data is preserved for the history. So beyond 6 months of time, we make sure that the seasonality effects and all will be stored somewhere else. Yeah.
Thanks, Avinash, and thanks for sharing one of the best practices, which is there within any data organization today, which is around optimization. We sometimes get too busy solving for newer problems that there is a ton of data that is piling up, which is not used, but it's also very important and one of the best practice to optimize the data that you have and make it to go or put it to good use.
Yeah, I have one
Ash,
more.
yeah.
Yeah, I had a use case or an example to say. So we have hired an ML guy before even hiring a data infrastructure person. So then we figured that okay, that's not the right point to begin with, right? So at that point of time, the my reporting manager, then he had big goals. And then we hired the ML guys from IITs and all. And then when they came and then have seen it, there is not much raw data to work upon. So that's when we realized, okay, we better go back and work on the data infrastructure in the first place. And there were several cases where certain ML models or certain databases on BigQuery, on GCP are being built for us, which are not even being used. So when we went back and tried to do the cost optimization, we realized that okay, there are several applications where we should stop right away, and we must have saved some 1,500 to 2,000 USD worth of billing in those instances. Every time we go there, we clean up, adding up to that savings.
Thanks, Avinash, for sharing this. Ashish, would you like to share your thoughts?
Yeah, sure. So when it comes to best practices, I think one thing which we have done good is that the data is organized and is stored in different systems based on the consumption of the data. So if we understand different sources of the data, so one that the application itself generates a lot of data nowadays, right? Whether it is application logs, which you can see, the metrics which is there, and then the data storage itself, which is the database or any other collection. So that is one part of the data. The other is the data which is being used by the business owners, and generally it is more of aggregated data. They might be using it for MISs, for reporting purposes, and so on and so forth. So one thing which we have done good is that based on the source itself, the data storage is very, very clearly defined. So which means that, for example, if the data is coming from application, so it goes into the logging data, where all the application logs are being, maintained. It is not anywhere mixing with the transaction data of the customer. So that is separately stored. Similarly, if these are metrics which we are storing of the monitoring, the production monitoring which is happening, that is also generating a lot of logs. Right? So that data is again stored in a different system. And these are all managed systems. Now, when it comes to the customer data, nowadays, there are a lot of policies which are driven by regulations that the data itself is now categorized as PII data, non-PII data, what you can keep, what you should not keep in plain text. So again, then the data is segregated into two parts when we are collecting, because we being neobanks, we will be storing all the data from the customer PII data, which is like his date of birth, his name, his phone number, his email, and so on and so forth. And then the other information as well, which is non-PII data. So again, the data is again then categorized within what is PII data, what is non-PII data. Whatever is PI, it is encrypted. It is a PII data what which is built in, it is kept there. Non-PII data is again kept separately. And then for business owners, we have specifically data lakes built in, where they can then, the data is all pushed to data warehouse. And then from there on top of that, they can have their MISs built, they can have their reporting tools built, where they can analyze this data. So one is this, again, then the last part of this is that we will be pushing some of this data to many of the SaaS services, which may be, Clever Tab, which we are using for, customer segmentation, which we might be using for remarketing, marketing, and so on and so forth. Now, again, you can't push, any confidential data there, right? So again, at that point of time, we have to anonymize data and then push it to them and use the data. So I think this is something which I believe is done in the right manner, that what is the data, who is the consumer of that data, and then you're pushing that data into respective repositories. The other thing which we have done, I think which Amnash covered a bit, what is your data storage policies in terms of where to store the data? Are you storing the data in database? Are you storing it in S3? Are you storing it in cache? And what data has to be stored where, right? So that has to go through a data management policy which we have internally. So as soon as there is a new data collection which comes into the picture, and it has to go via the data management policy. And then, like the right people have to give sign off that, okay, if they're going to store this data, what is the right place to store that data? For how long are you going to store that data? What is the archival policy for that data? And then definitely, one aspect which Amnash also covered in terms of cost, because most of the cost goes into two things: one, compute and storage, right? So, and storage being one of the biggest ones. So I think that is the other part. Then what is the access control over that data which is stored? For example, we are storing a lot of customer data, which is customer transaction data, right? So all the debits, credits which you are doing in your bank account is stored with Neo. So how can we make sure that this data is only accessed to the customer and no one else? So that is the level of data security which has been implemented to make sure that the relevant people only have access to that. And then at the same time, there are a lot of audit logs which are maintained to make sure that if there is an issue tomorrow, then we should be able to backtrack and then see that which data was accessed by whom. And then last, I think it is more on the data backup policy. So we make sure that the relevant data is backed up on a daily basis or a monthly basis based on the severity of the data, so that that data is available if something goes wrong tomorrow. Yeah, that's it from my side.
Interesting perspective, Ashish. Because you're in the banking sector, there would be a whole lot of compliance and regulatory issues, published by RBI to abide with, and so on and so forth. Not just to do with the PI data and audit, but everything else to do with data would be delicately
Right.
managed to ensure compliance and governance and security. So thanks a ton for sharing this. Akash, we can't wait to hear what you have in mind.
Yeah, sure. So I think Ashish has basically mentioned a lot of things what we face. Like one of the biggest issue is the PII information. So of course, to basically the PII information is actually required by the system, the application system, and only few people have the access to the PII data. So yeah, so we have also created a layer where we basically separate the PII and the non-PII like information separately. For further, the PII data is also accessed only by very few people when it is required by the application, or or for basically logging. But most of the people only see the non-PII information. Now, one of the issues what we also face is that we also have to purge the data, right? So it is not that the data what we have received will basically stay in the system like for the rest of the life. So we only have few days where we can actually save the data, and that has been basically supported by the banks, right? So they actually mention the days like till when we can keep the data. So we can keep the models which is built on the data, but what we can't keep the raw data. So that is why there is also a purging thing, a purging layer what we have created. But what I've seen, right, the biggest issue what we have seen, that when we were in the growth phase, right, we had actually built two or three products in basically parallel. So what I've seen that there were things which has happened, that so there is certain features which is basically required by multiple people, and what was happening is that the same tables are created across the team, right? So to basically solve that, what we have also done is that we have actually have a BI tool internally which is accessed by all the people internally. So they can use that BI tool to understand what exactly the data is present in different places, so that they don't basically create the same tables I mean in like multiple places, because that is one of the issues what I see which is very common when we basically build multiple products in parallel. right? And then of course, I mean, like the thing which is very important, that where exactly which data will store, right? So we have like data warehouse, we have data lake, we have primary DB, we have secondary DB, because the kind of data we have, right? So so the primary DB, like how it works is that it will not scale that much, right? Most people, the primary DB will not scale, because we have to basically we have to basically have features like sorting and filtering, and which on like on CRs of rows, right? So that is why we have to have we have basically created secondary DB which could actually handle that scale and like do this. So that is why we basically we also have a system where you can pick and choose what data you want to present where. And of course, if you want to create like real-time dashboards, so we have also created real-time dashboards, and there's options for customers who can actually come to the dashboard and create their own dashboards. So for that data has to be stored in data warehouse. So all those things. So it is very important that where you save the data to actually handle all the use cases as well.
Great insights, Akash. Thank you so much. We've talked about challenges around data. We talked about some of the best practices that you've rolled out in your respective organizations. Would you also be comfortable sharing how do you make the most of the data that you have to have a competitive edge in the market that you are respectively in? It'll be hugely beneficial for me and everybody else watching this. Ashish, can I call you up to share your thoughts on this?
Yeah, sure. So I will take an example of the customer onboarding. Maybe let's take that example, and not primarily competitive edge. That may be one angle, but that will also let everyone know that how crucial the data is. So the example is that when you do customer onboarding, we take some documents from the customer, like his PAN, his Aadhaar, and so on and so forth. Now it looks very simple, but let me tell you the challenge. The challenge is that in India today, you can get a PAN and Aadhaar data in 400 rupees. You can go to any village, you can pick one person there and say that, okay, I'm going to give you 400 rupees, please give me PAN and Aadhaar data. And there can be a forgery account created on your name, and you will not be also aware of that. And then this data is then used for doing all the wrong transactions, whether it is getting the remittance inside the country, or it is used for sending the data outside the country. So this is how the data is misused within our country. Now, what we have done to make sure that, how do we make sure that if, for example, if Rakhi is opening her account, how do we make sure that she is the only one who is opening the account, rather than someone taking her details and then opening the account, right? So as soon as you download the application, then there is a SIM binding process which is there. I think most of the competitors do that. Now, what happens after that is, once you give your PAN data, we are able to get a lot of other insights also from your mobile device. For example, I will be able to know what kind of applications you have installed on a mobile application. That gives me more insight about Rakhi as a persona, right? So if she has something which is like maybe a Confluence application which or she has some Google applications, if she has Times of India versus some absurd apps, then I would be able to figure out what this persona is around, right? So is she the right persona or not? And then basis your PAN, basis your Aadhaar, then we also get many other details from, in this case, from NPCI and UIDI, using which we try to get your CRIF score, for example. In that, I will be able to know, how much investment this person has done in the past, and basis the CRIF score, I will again be able to add something to your persona which I have already got. Similarly, I will do your CKYC. That will tell me that how many other KYCs have been done in different bank accounts. So then there are applications which will give you, for example, if I send your email ID to them, it will tell you that, okay, this person has a LinkedIn account as well, whether this person has a Confluence account or not, whether this person has a WhatsApp ID or not, when was it created, how many active sessions are there. So all this information, around 16 social profiles I can get. This is the power of the data, which is then used, and then we rank the customer in a specific category. That helps us understand, if this is a legitimate customer or not. This is one example which I gave you, and there are many other examples which we make sure in the onboarding journey. Before I onboard the customer, to make sure that we are onboarding authenticate customer or not. Yeah, so I just wanted to give that example. There are many other AI ML practices which we use. Once the data is there, we do the data massaging on top of that, and then we are able to figure out, okay, can we do cross sell? Can we not do cross sell? If we can do cross sell, then what exactly we can do? But I wanted to give that example, which where we feel that we have to put a lot of intelligence to make sure that we are onboarding the right customer.
Ashish, you got some of us worried in this on this call now that there might be bank accounts that I'm not aware of.
Yeah.
So, but I would also, draw a few insights back onto, the kind of data and information that you have at an aggregate level from the customers that you onboard could also be further used not just for fraud detection and identifying or ranking them, but also be used. I'm not sure if you do all of this at this moment, but for probably upsell and cross sell, identifying cohorts for marketing or targeting and so on and so forth. So that's another use case which could be relevant. Thanks for sharing these insights, Ashish. I just want to switch gear from fintech to the construction side. Prasunjit, would you like to share your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so the data of customers that we have is of generally high value people. Okay, like companies. We don't cater to individuals yet. Okay, so that data is really like high security. Is required in that. How much a customer is ordering and what materials ordering. Many times these are government agencies working on some projects. Okay, so security is a big concern there. And to start with, when you work with a startup which started as a non-technical startup to begin with, and then started incorporating the technical stuff within it, so there's a lot of gap in what is ideally supposed to be, and what we should and what we are working with. Okay, so the first biggest challenge is to bridge that gap, and that is a challenging path. And as soon as you start catering to the data collection aspects, if you do not take care of those security aspects, later on the challenge becomes even more daunting. Okay, so right at the word go, the security should have been taken care of, and to some extent it has been, but not to be, not perfectly. Okay, so I have been working with this company for a few months only, and I think there's a lot to do. Okay, but luckily there are many things that we have been able to improve upon. Many things I have been able to work along with my team to add to it. The data pipelining and everything have been improved, and I think the security that the current cloud infrastructures provide. Okay, if unless there's no human error like posting their keys online, unless and until that happens, the security is something which is unparalleled to any previous times 5 years down ago. Okay, so that's why we can relax a bit, but relaxing a bit is the key here. We cannot never really relax in terms of security. The weakest link is as strong as you are in terms of security. Okay, so data security is a concern. Data misuse is another concern. On a personal level, we find that we end up, we search one stuff and we end up getting calls from 100 people for in the next 1 month. Okay, so that is another menace in our lives that we all have to deal, I believe. So that is my personal experience also. But yeah, the data, I think there has to be some rules which actually define that misuse of data to be a crime, because it actually is. Right now the companies may think it's a harmless crime, that we are just gathering customers. Okay, but I think in US and some countries there are some rules. If the customer doesn't want to be disturbed, we have that DND here also, but it doesn't really work. Okay, so there are some stricter rules that are required, some stricter compliances that are required, not only from one company, not only from one provider, but on a more centralized state. Coming back to a problem that I discussed, I think Avinash discussed, that many different sources are sending their data in. Many different banks have different kinds of data structures. So I worked for TCS around 5 years back. Okay, and there was one thing that came in up was multiple um, competitors collaborated on a standardization of a particular format. Okay, so that was something which came out to be an ISO standard, and that is something which was hard to imagine, because all of them, those companies, were competitors. But then, for a betterment of the of data exchange between them, of even of a business, if whatever data they create, if they want to sell or buy amongst themselves, they introduced a standardization method for that. Okay, and I was lucky enough to work on that project where I implemented that in our company. So that really went far, and helped a lot. And nowadays vehicles diagnostics, which I believe we don't really it doesn't change our everyday life much, but whenever our vehicles go to the service centers, the work gets done a bit quicker, in a better way. So that is what something that that has the impact. So the similar thing can be implemented here also. Why can't we have a centralized, or a common goal? Even competitors, I'm pretty sure, have a common goal. Wait, sorry. Yeah, so even competitors in any field, be it, they do have some common goals. So to achieve them, I think it is high time that we should collaborate and cater to the number one, the centralization or standardization of data. Number two, a compliance in enforcing, which is very required in terms of both security as well as the customers on privacy. So these are the I believe are high callings at this point of time.
Prasoon, you had talked about how security can give you a competitive edge. Some of the anecdotes that you mentioned, you talked about, we would need a deeper discussion on that. I would look forward to that. But thanks for sharing your thoughts here. Uh, Akash, would you like to share insights in terms of how data has helped Credgenics jump the curve or stay ahead of the game?
Right. So, yeah, so in my experience, right, it's a basically three-step process, right? So first thing is that we should be able to show the people who are actually like doing the things or the business, right? We should be able to show them the data, right? So that is the first step. So what I usually do is that I basically sit with the business folk, understand what is the data they are looking at the first stage, right? So once we understand what is the data they need to take the action, what we do is that we understand that data. The second thing what we do is that then we try to basically look at the data, build some insights on that, and then we basically show the insights to those customers, or we actually show the insights to the business folks, so that they can actually understand those insights, and then they can tune their actions, so that we can basically optimize the process what they're doing. So what happens is that what we have seen, that when we start showing the insights to these business folks or the guys who are executing, they will, of course, they will find a pattern, right? So they will start finding a pattern which will actually make their life easier. And then the basically the last stage what we take is that once we basically understand that pattern, we try to build the models which could actually find the like patterns on their own, and then we basically build the models to basically help these business folks or operation guys to understand that these are the right patterns, and then you should execute as soon as you get this basically pattern, you should actually execute this. And that is how we have reached to a state of like automation. So the same thing what we have done like internally at Credgenics as well. So what we have done is that first we basically sat with basically we sat with the business folks who actually like do things, or like the guys who's actually basically have to like take some actions. Then we basically understand the data they needed, then we actually showed them some kinds of insights on that, and then these insights are actually actionable insights. Then we started showing them that if you see this pattern, you should actually do this. And slowly what we have seen, that the business has actually came back to us like saying that we want to see this insight. And that way, the first like what we did is that we improve our insights to a great extent. As soon as we reach to that stage, then we know that once we have very good insights, now the next stage is to basically find the right patterns. And once we find that right patterns, we have started building some models which actually help them actually automate the whole process now. So the process what like business used to do manually, we have basically almost like build a campaign manager which could actually does the whole task based on just the model predictions. So that is what like that is how so in my past experiences as well, what I've also like always done is that it is very important to understand the business domain. Once we basically understand the business domain, we basically try to basically like find the patterns, and then those patterns are basically extracted like by machine learning model, and that is basically directly used for automation, and that is how we can create an edge. And that is how we have also done. We have actually built multiple models by just like understanding the problem in more detail.
Good to know that your data engineering team and the data science team, they stay close to the business team and understand what sort of insights would be beneficial for the business growth, which is often a gap between the technical team and the business team. But great to know that that's given you a competitive advantage. When you talk about campaign manager, was that more to do with customer acquisition, or what sort of models were you running for those?
Yeah, so what basically CreditGenic does is that, right? So like suppose if you basically go to a bank and then you basically get a loan. So if a person is not paying the loan, right, then bank has to actually do some kind of so they have to reach the customers to actually get the loan back, right? So it could be digital communication, it could be calling, it could be you have to send a legal notice to a customer. So that is across. So once the customer has become NPA, then you have to actually send a legal notice to the customer as well. So what basically CreditGenics has done is actually we have created a SaaS platform. So now what happens is that banks actually come to our platform, and all the guys, right, who have to. So and what we have done is that on this SaaS platform you can send digital communication, you can basically do the calling from the same platform, you can send the legal notice digitally or through the I mean through the the like speed post way as well. So all those things you can directly do it from the platform. So how the models we have built, right? So just to give you one simple example, right? So there, if you see after like 90 plus DPD, which means that if a person has not paid the loan back for like 90 days, then the recovery rates are less than 3%, right? So out of the 100 customers, only 3 customers per month would pay if they have not paid for the last 3 months. So now like out of 100 people, only 3 people are paying, right? So it becomes utmost important that you should be able to identify, instead of having 100 people, if we can find a way how we can decrease this set to, let's suppose, 10 20, right? So we can run basically focused campaigns, right? So that is one problem what we have said. So we basically sat with the like banks, understood how they actually run the campaigns, and then what we have done is that looking at that, we understood what they are looking for. One simple one simple behavior I can tell is that if a person is interested in paying, then only he will actually talk to you, right? So what we have done is that just basically understanding that behavior, we have actually built features which could capture that behavior, and then we had actually built this model and which could basically predict the risk segment of each of the customer, which could be so there are three risk segment, and each customer would be part of one of the risk segment. And what we have seen that like 80% or 85% of the money what the banks would make will actually come from the lower risk segment, and that is what we have done. So now we have built this model, we have put this model on the platform, is integrated in the platform, so that banks can come, they can directly they can actually prioritize their plan, that whom they should reach out based on the risk segment.
This is a fine example of using data and the stories that data would tell you and building models on top of it, productize it, and then take it to banks as a SaaS platform. Fantastic. So which was in fact my next question. How has data helped in focusing on innovation, launching new products, new solutions in the market? Chadri, would you like to share your thoughts on this?
I said it's an excellent question. I think these days, I think everybody knows that data is the key, right? So if you are very keen to really figure out, data has a lot of answers, right? So it's all about that focus, right? So data, in terms of innovation, how it has really helped us, I think I'll come from the top, right? So it has really helped us to really innovate the business model as well, right? So how do I, what kind of model really works for what kind of segment of customers, right? So that is one thing that being very data focused has really helped us to innovate the business model as such, right? So how do you really tweak your model so that it really works for that kind of segment, right? Uh, and the next level is segmenting of your customers. So once you start segmenting your customer based on the metrics that you start defining for, let's say, for example, if you're talking about a loan journey, probably you're talking about prospect to lead to login to then the dispersal conversions, right? So that's the standard flow. Right now you can really get deeper into like what kind of segments, how they are really operating, and from that data you can also figure out, okay, what kind of experiments that you really wanted to run to figure out how they will really work for that kind of segment, right? And then obviously you'll generate more data and see how these things are really working out, right? So the segmenting actually helps a lot and has helped us to really define new features very well, right? So that means that defining the product roadmap also comes from once you start segmenting and figuring out what segments of customers, what kind of features are really suitable, right? And then at the base level, you're collecting so much of data, you'll really figure out how are your systems really working, how are your you know uh, code is really running as such, what more you can really do to figure out as simple as clickstream metrics, right? So how do you use that information to start giving a better experience to the customer, right? So that's the lowest level probably, right? So at all levels, it helps to really take your product or your offering to the next level, right? So which will for the business to your segmentation to your kind of extreme level technology level, how things are working out, right? So yeah, so those are three levels. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing. Avinash, can I pick your brain on understanding more on how data has helped in focusing on innovation?
Sure. So if every one of you guys must have used a travel application, booked a flight or a train some point of time. More or less every platform looks similar. You search, you get a list of results, and then you pay, add those traveler details, right? So now being in such kind of a old industry where there is the concept or the platform itself is not innovative, like, because it's existing, and there are about 80,000 OTS in the world, offline, online together. So now how do we create that differentiation, and how do we make sure the conversion rates exist and the business would flourish? So that boils down to the fact that we play with the data, we leverage data to make the differentiation. So the moment the user searches, then we begin our personalization in our entire booking journey. So based on that, we'll try to identify the user personas based on the routes, based on the devices, iOS, Android, the location. All these auto captured parameters would be our first set of user properties which we define, and based on the user journey, then we keep adding those or enriching those user properties, so that the segmentation will become at a micro level, so that essentially the segment would have only one customer, that is the guy who is the person who is doing the booking, right? So I can give an example of recent activity what we had done. So we have started to converge on all the ideas, how do we improve our conversion rates, being a bit and we have being a travel industry, we have got hit by COVID, and we had to come back at this point of time, right? We have survived it then, but then we had these targets to grow. So then we converged all the ideas. Now there are several ideas given by several people, uh, interns, product managers, and industry experience people with 15 years experience or so, right? Now how do we validate those hypotheses? So every opinion can't be built and done, we do an A/B testing about it, right? So resources are minimal. So what we had done is we went back to the data, we tried to create those user personas uh, at a micro level. So we have created those segmentations at our side with based on the accurate data which we have. And then we try to validate these hypotheses and build on one such hypothesis, which I could mention here, is the recommended filter section, which would come in our search results page. Once somebody searches, and then the results would pop up, right? So based on the historical data, we have identified, based on certain search parameters the user would give as an input, the listing of the page is completely dynamic in nature. It's not the same, and it can't be identified as one single or 10 types of result pages. Probably there are hundreds of combinations of results pages are available there. And then we started to do these A/B tests, and then our conversion rate from the listing page to the next screen has dramatically improved. It was around 30%, and now it's around 70%. So not just once, every time the user reaches that screen, that happens right now. And also, booking travel is not a one session activity, actually. So it happens across multiple sessions, and this behavior has been noticed in all these sessions. So that's one example of how we have used these data. And also, we try to leverage on creating you know the urgency for the users by not doing a large scale ML, but then we have processed the data, and we have created that sort of database. We run this query every day in the morning, and we create that sense of urgency. For example, 300 people have booked it in the past X number of days, or currently concurrently 100 people are looking at this route, and there are only 4 seats left. So these kind of sense of urgencies have been created, and so all these A/B tests are directly related to the conversion rates. So that's how we have tried to do it.
Excellent and very, very relatable points that you have brought up. Thanks for sharing this. Okay, so while the digital age has been successful in promoting innovation far and wide, it's also facilitated what we call a data crisis, which is also known as low quality data. We have gone around the room, we've discussed about the importance of having a well-rounded data warehouse to address this. But just curious to know how you are addressing or ensuring data quality in your respective organizations. Ashish, would you like to share your thoughts on this?
Yeah, sure. So within our organization, Raki, what we do is that we take a bottom-up approach, which means that any new data is stored, which comes from the requirement perspective. So along with the product requirements, the data requirements are also given. So we make sure that if there is any data which is new, which is getting stored with this product requirement, then we clearly know that what data is getting stored and why is this data getting stored, who is going to be the custodian of this data, and who is going to be the recipient of this data. So that is very well documented along with the product specs itself. And along with that, the policies also around that. How much long do we need this data? When can we archive this data? What will be the data storage of that? So that is one part which we make sure that until unless this is not considered, the requirements are not complete. And then, similarly, that is handed over to the development team as well. Now, once that is done, the other role of the quality team, which is there, is to make sure that whatever requirements are mentioned in the document are being met. Some of the examples can be that a PAN number should not be printed in any of the application logs. I'm just taking an example. The data, the quality team has to make sure that any PII data or any personal data is not getting printed anywhere in the logs, right? Similarly, it should not be pushed to any SaaS applications which we are interacting with, whether it is a ClickView stream or any other applications which we are using. So that is one part of it. That is what we call within our organization is bottom-up approach. That as soon as the application requirements are coming in, or wherever whoever is given data requirement, there's a format which needs to be filled, which is very, very clear, whether you need it for MIS, whether you need it for logging, and who can all be custodian and the recipient of this data. Then the other is making sure the quality team, the data quality team needs to make sure that all the data is properly getting audit trailed as well, which means that any data which you are now going to store, we need to make sure that the data, whoever is accessing it, at what time is getting stored in the systems itself, so that tomorrow again, if there is any issue, then it is easy to track. The other part in terms of ensuring the data is that, while we talk about all these things, until unless you train your teams, you know, it is going to be very difficult for anyone to make sure that or ensure the data of the data within the organization is well established. So we invest a lot in internal trainings as well, which makes sure that uh, whoever is coming new, who is joining us, they understand what the data means for us, because this data is quite confidential, and eventually, you are storing a data of a customer. His bank transactions are getting stored in different applications, and we need to make sure that anyone who is working with us, he understands the criticality of this data. So we definitely invest a lot in terms of internal trainings, and in terms of the data access, I mentioned about the audit trail, but apart from that, there are a lot of guardrails are in place, whether it is a WAF which is already in place, whether it is a application vulnerability testing which we keep doing to make sure the data is not getting accessed by different sources at the same time. For example, multiple customers should not be able to log into the system. So these are few measures which we take, one in terms of storage and the other in terms of access of the data.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Ashish. So at Google, we certainly are an engineering uh, firm first, and we face data challenges, whether it is related to fraudulent activities or quality, data quality. We face challenges on a daily basis from one of our most demanding customers, and the very unique problems are thrown at us each day, and that unique customer is Google, and we're solving for the solutions that we use from Google on a daily basis, like a YouTube or Chrome or Gmail and so on and so forth. And that's what we now take to the market, so that other organizations and firms can benefit of what we have already built. I'm very curious to go around the table and know if you had used some of the data quality tools from Google Cloud platform, and why has it been important, and what has been the outcome of it? Avinash, you talked about machine learning, and therefore the quality of data is paramount to ensure that you get the right results of the model that you train on. Would you like to go ahead and share your thoughts on whether you have used data quality tools from Google?
Uh, we have used a lot of tools from GCP, like Bigtable, BigQuery, Firestore, and Firebase capabilities. And to be honest, we have not used any data quality tools as such, but we have built our own custom dashboards, which are basically taking care of the data quality. So, for example, we have linked BigQuery and the Firestore data or the Firebase data directly to our Data Studio reports, and we have created these templates which will make sure that if there is any data disruption, which is basically at the capture level itself, we'll get to identify them, because we have traditionally we have found that okay, whenever a new release happens, probably something which is already working well might get disrupted, or whenever a new parameter gets added to an existing event, that gets disrupted. So these are certain templates which we have created, and we use Data Studio extensively. We have validated a lot of other tools, Tableaus, Isons, Crosstabs, multiple, and then we felt that okay, Data Studio is good enough, at least at this scale, and that's easy to use, and all our stakeholders are well equipped with the understanding of this visualization platform. So apart from these, our data engineers also keep looking at the raw data once in a while, and then try to understand if there is any data disruption with respect to the data type formats, or any other new data getting inserted, any issues are being happening there. So these are certain measures which we take. uh, and recently we have started to use Firestore capabilities, which is a part of Firebase platform, where we capture real-time data, and that gives us understanding about if there is any data disruption, we get to know in real time. So we don't need to wait one day, or wait for the processing to happen and all. So that also gave us some visibility on the real-time disruptions.
Thanks, Avinash. Good to know that you are on Google Data Studio, which is now Looker Studio for real-time insights as well as doing storytelling on top of your existing data. Excellent. Thanks for the points shared. Akash, over to you.
So like I said, right, the biggest problem what we face is that we have multiple products, right, and same product is used by multiple banks, and there is no standardization. Even if there are multiple banks and NBFCs use a product, there is no standardization, right? So this problem we are actually facing from day one. So we have actually created this tool internally. Yeah, so to be honest, we don't use GCP tool for this. We use different GCP tools, of course, like BigQuery for data warehousing and stuff, but not exactly for the data quality check. So what we have done is that, right, so for each product and each company, we have actually created different rules, right? And whenever a certain basically rule fails, so at the capture level, when the data is basically is captured on our basically database, like at that time, if a certain rules like fails, we have a table where we actually save the data, and that basically table is linked to our like Slack channel, so that whenever there is a failure, we get the message basically in real time. And then we have a team like internally which actually looks at all the issues, and we try to solve it as fast as possible. Because what happens is that for each of the product, we have like different dashboard, different machine learning models, which so some of the machine learning models are real time, some of the machine learning models are batch models. So of course, like so if the data quality fails, then of course the next level insights and the models would of course like fail. So it is utmost like important like for us is that we actually save the issue, like we actually solve the issue in like real time. So that is how we are basically handling the data quality at like at the start of time.
Thanks, Akash. Puchadri, are you on any Google tools for data quality
Sorry.
or lineage or data warehousing or visualization?
Unfortunately, not on Google. We tried once. We failed on GCP 3-4 years ago. So we are with AWS at this point of time, but we have built our own way of really validating the data quality of the data, right? So how we do that is little different compared to, I think, what others are trying to tell, right? So uh, uh, you know. Uh, you know the data quality has to start from the way when you collect to till you build the intelligence, right? So all stages practically, right? So a data quality check has to really happen, right? So when the data come in, right? So did the data rightly come in, right? So there could be challenges on transport once you get it, once you store it, and once you store that data in your probably production databases, when you're moving that data to your analytic environment, data lake, once it is there in data lake, once you create your data warehouse on top of it, whether the data has the quality is there or not. So there are multiple layers at which you really have to build in your data quality checks, right? So one of the ways that we really do this is called as anomaly detection. So we really look at the data and say, okay, uh, aggregately how the data should really behave. Now if I can really do checks and balances on each of the data and say, okay, the data should be this, the structure should be this, all those are at the database level, I can probably already take care of, right? So to make sure that everything is happening, right? But the data that has really gotten right, field levels are all correct, but the aggregate data that has come in, is the quality is still there, right? So that is one of the important points. If that is missed, then the intelligence that you really build actually goes for a toss, right? So you cannot really get insights from your data, right? So anomaly detection is one important tool that we use. We aggregate the data and we really look at the anomalies, how the data was there yesterday, a month ago, how it is right now, how the different fields are, different parameters are, right? Different features that we have built, how they are behaving, is the behavior changing, right? So could there be problem with the, data coming in itself where we are, the check is not really happening. Maybe the customers who are sending me the data have challenges where they're not sending the proper data, maybe, right? So anomaly detection is one thing that has really helped us to really figure out these kind of challenges, because wrong data, you have wrong model, and then it's all disaster, right? So yeah, so that's what I think we have done, at least. Yeah.
Thanks, Puchadri. It's unfortunate we couldn't work together.
Right. I
There's
did
always
talk to Vishal, I think head of products, where I met him. So he's my alumni as well. So I talked to him like, how can we
okay.
really, to use some of the Google tools. I think we had one or two discussions with the Google team, probably. I think, yeah. If they're
No worries.
interesting stuff, for sure, I think we would want to. As I said, we are a data culture driven company. So
Yeah.
wherever good tools are there, for sure, right? So we would want to leverage them and derive more benefit of them, for sure. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing your thoughts. So over the past hour or so, we have discussed about challenges around data. We have talked about best practices around implementing data management. We also talked about how data could give a competitive advantage, and some of you shared stories around building innovation around data. So thanks, Tan, for coming together this evening. I've learned a bunch of stuff, and I'm sure a lot of insights that were shared today were valuable and could be replicable in many other firms. Thanks a ton. Sure. Thanks, everyone. Thanks to all the panelists who joined us at the Data Leaders Exchange today. And the insights that you shared today are truly valuable and replicable across the industry. Thanks a ton for the evening, and thank you for joining us again.